you should always avoid the loudest voices
Right.
in any area, maybe, but certainly in any area of Christianity. You should always avoid the loudest voices. I mean, God's voice, anytime we hear God's voice in scripture, it's a still small voice. And I feel like that
Right.
mirrors itself as well. The people who are closest to God are the stillest and the smallest voices. But the power with which they speak, like a Mother Teresa, was not a loud, booming individual, but her practice, the way she lived and modeled her faith, people listened when she spoke to every word that she said. And so I think you're right. The Christian nationalists are the loudest voices right now, but they're also the most counterfeits to the true gospel.
Yeah. And they're doing a fantastic job of being a driving force of pushing people away from anything that looks like faith, because people look at that and go, oh, that's just hate wrapped in scripture, or that's just racism wrapped in scripture. And no wonder people are leaving. One of the things that you talked about in the book that was really interesting to me was being at the Abbey. You started to understand how these different ancient practices could bring you closer to God, even if there was a disconnect. Like, I'm probably not going to say this exactly how you did in the work, but how I interpreted it was like between your intellect and maybe the intellect of deconstruction, and then the faith practices can pull you, or pull your heart, as you said in the book, closer to God. Can you speak to that? Because a lot of these faith practices, and we are in the season of Lent, so there's going to be faith practices that fundamentalists just don't do, as you mentioned. But just speak to that disconnect between head and heart and God, and how those practices worked out for you, and you see them helping other people reconstruct as well.
Yeah. Western faith, especially Western evangelicalism, is based on the mind. Whenever we talk about belief, we talk about doctrine, we talk about the head, we talk about giving assent or ascribing to something. And the Bible really kind of minimizes that kind of language or talk when it comes to faith. Faith is always something that is experiential, that's spirit-led, that is supernatural, something that is practiced, as we've talked about. So, I don't think that there is any practice or place that is holier than any other. But I do think that there is something to be said for immersing oneself in an environment that is different than the context in which we normally live. And so I think, whenever we think of things like Lent, we make the joke, well, I'm going to give up chocolate for Lent, or I'm going to give up, something that maybe doesn't ask much of me. But in the spirit of Lent, I don't think it's so much about what we give up, but that we do something that somehow or other changes our rhythms,